Welcome, everyone. It is wonderful to have you here. Welcome to our fourth Learning Institute at Ingenuity. Today, we're going to be talking about cultivating inclusive arts education, practical strategies for culturally responsive teaching. And we are also going to be recording the Learning Institute. So I wanted to just make sure that everyone was aware of that. And for those of you that don't know me, my name is Lily Cruz. I am the Director of Partnerships and Learning at Ingenuity. And I come into this space as a Boricua, as a Chicago kid, as a former Chicago student, as well as a former Chicago Public School teacher, school leader, and now parent. And I also come into this space with really transformative experiences as a young person, as well as an adult, um, in the arts, and believe that la cultura cura. So translated, right, our culture heals. And we'll actually talk a little bit more about that today. And I want to now have my co-facilitator, Jackie Rodriguez, introduce herself.
Hey, everybody. Thank you, Lily. My name is Jackie Rodriguez. I come into the space. I'm gonna take your starting sentence, Lily. As a Mexicana, I grew up on 47th Street. I'm from back of the yards. Um, Two neighborhoods are really my home, back of the yards and Pilsen. Um, I am a teacher at Benito Juarez. I was a history teacher for a long time. And now I teach, I have a program called the Teaching Academy where we're preparing students who want to be future teachers. And I'm also co-founder and co-director of this beautiful cultural center, cultural space that we have in our community called 18th Street Casa de Cultura. And we'll talk a little bit more about it later, but yeah, I'm excited to be here. And yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much, Jackie. And before Jackie shares some really amazing just storytelling and examples, and takes us through some activities, we'll actually just spend a little bit of time grounding in why we're here, why Ingenuity, holds these spaces, and also get some grounding around culturally responsive teaching or CRT. If you have it, that's amazing, but we also want to make sure that collectively in this space, we contextualize it a little bit. And so Ingenuity's mission, Ingenuity's why is that every student in every grade in every school has access to the arts as part of their education. And we do this through a few different strategies or approaches. Um, some of you were probably at the State of the Arts education convening, so you know that gathering data around how many minutes of arts education, where their teachers, what are the arts disciplines, right? All of that really matters in advocating for this mission to be real, as well as the Creative Schools Fund, which allows schools and partners to come together and continue to, again, make this mission come to life through partnerships and learning, which is my team, as well as advocacy. And we also believe in the values of quality. I think it's important to name, like when we say quality arts education, right? This is something that has been created with the community pre-COVID through a 2-year process around, well, what is it? And it included engaging community folks, schools, teachers, students, families, arts organizations. And so this is another important piece that we like to share around what we believe. And we will not be having a community of practice for this session, but we are going to pick back up in May. So we skip April and then we go into May where we will have an amplifying student voices and enhancing arts education assessment that will be accompanied with an in-person community of practice in collaboration with Arts Ed Shy. So want to make sure that folks also have that on their radar. And for today's objectives, again, we are using the model of head, heart, hands, or intellectual, emotional, and application objectives. We're first going to spend a lot of time in the head space, contextualizing culturally responsive teaching, but we also want to make sure that we're in the heart space, and we will be reflecting on our own connections to our ancestry and our history, hopefully moved by a lot of what Jackie will share, and always thinking about, well, then what does this mean for what we can do for students in our arts education programs? And just like the quality of standards, there are arts partner standards of practice that were also created with the arts sector that again included students, teachers, arts organizations, other arts spaces. And today's session is going to be probably we can include many more, but the ones that I think we'll be focusing on the most is around creating a healthy classroom culture through artistic self-awareness and cultural inclusion. But also, how do we prepare for quality instruction, right? So again, seeking to understand school community students, as well as thinking about what that means for our arts education curricula. And the image you see here is one from 18th Street Casa de Cultura, just to give a little preview of what we'll hear more about, as well as this image. And for our agenda, we will share community agreements for our time together in just a moment. We'll have a land acknowledgement. Again, I will share a CRT overview just to contextualize it, some history about it. And then we'll spend most of our time with Jackie before we close at 3. And so would love if folks can, if you're able to, come off mute and just speak our community agreements into the space. Ideally, we'd be creating community agreements together, but since we're not always together, I'm offering some that we can bring into the space and respond to after we share all of them, or as we go, that's fine too. So if folks are able to speak them into the space, I ask that you do.
Take space, make space from a place of personal awareness of identity and intersectionality.
Thank you.
Speak from personal experience.
Thank you.
Practice confidentiality, take away lessons, but not personal content.
Thank you. I'll speak this one. So hold and support safe, brave space. And I'll speak the last one too to keep us moving. And that is to stay present and engaged. And so before going to norms and housekeeping, if there are any that are missing or any that folks have questions about, or any that folks are like, you know what, I really need to practice that today. I'm going to really push myself to do this today. Would love for folks to share any and all of those that are speaking to them now into the chat. So if you have a question about any of them, want to suggest one, or if there's one that you really want to focus on today. Thank you, Lucille. Speak from personal experience. Martha, excited to be in the space, to become more aware of, might be more there. Emily, I will stay present. Thank you. And in addition to our community agreements, just some session norms and housekeeping so we're all on the same page. Please use the chat. Use it to share thoughts, questions, reactions. You know, sometimes when I'm facilitating and I see something come through, I'll pause because I want to know what's there. I have no problem with that. You know, we want to make sure that folks are engaging in whichever way makes sense for them. Please take care of yourself. We will not have a break. So take your bio breaks, your stretch breaks, whatever it is that you need. Make sure that you are doing that. Please mute when not speaking so we can hear whoever is speaking. And closed captioning will be available with the video that is recorded. Slides will also be shared after the session. And as I just shared, the session is being recorded and will be up on our YouTube channel and will be emailed out to everyone. So I think there was a request for recording, but we would love to be able to do that. I will also make sure that one of the reasons we do that is to edit it, just to make sure that it is around the learning. So that will all be available. So now I am going to pass it off to Jackie to lead our land acknowledgement.
Thank you, Lily. So right now we're gonna just not only do a land acknowledgement, but kind of also start putting us in the space of kind of not only where I come from, but just also the knowledge that I have acquired, like the community that I'm a part of, and just kind of like that collective arts practice that we're going to be talking a little bit about in the presentation. So I'm a part of a collective of musicians called that play a specific type of music from Veracruz, Mexico. It's called son jarocho, but there's other ways we call the music, like la música de jarana, la música de campo, stuff like that. It's a tradition that's over 400 years old, and it comes from Veracruz, Mexico. It's a tradition that's specifically Afro-Indigenous to that area of Mexico. And so the son or the song that you guys are going to hear is called Siki Siri. It's a way that we open and kind of ask permission to be in the space together. Lily's going to also put in the chat the verses that we're singing, and how the way they're in Spanish, but how the way they're translated into English. And from there, you can kind of see how we're giving thanks to the land, to each other, to the directions, to the things that nature, environment, and just kind of how the way you can utilize music to kind of bring out all those things that we might not necessarily are able to do kind of just like on a daily practice. So yeah, I hope you guys enjoy it, and let's hear it.
Divino cielo, te ruego permiso para déjame darte un abrazo, cuánto gusto me da verte.
Le doy gracias a mi suerte porque con el tiempo acaso, porque con el tiempo acaso, más y más pueda quererte.
Le doy gracias a mi suerte porque con el tiempo acaso, porque con el tiempo acaso, más y más puedo quererte.
Ay, que sí, que no, unos cantan porque saben,
Ay, que sí, que no.
otros cantan por cantar.
Ahora sí, mañana no.
Yo canto porque se acabe
Válgame Dios, válgame Dios.
la tristeza y el penal. Yo canto porque se acabe la tristeza y el penal.
Ya me voy a despedir porque así tiene que ser, porque así tiene que ser, ya me voy a despedir.
Ya me voy a despedir, porque así tiene que ser, porque así tiene que ser. Ya me voy a despedir.
Ya que estuvimos pasando un ratito de placer, porque quién sabe hasta cuándo nos volveremos a ver.
Ya que estuvimos pasando y un ratito de placer, porque quién sabe hasta cuándo nos volveremos a ver.
Ay, que sí, que no, salimos cantando así.
Que sí, válgame Dios.
Vereda del Alto Monte,
Ay, que no.
dime por cuál horizonte.
Ya me voy a despedir.
Tus ojos se van sin mí, salimos cantando así, vereda del Alto Monte.
Thank you so much, Jackie, for taking us through the land acknowledgement. I just always find so much joy seeing you also perform and really grounding us in how that piece is a land acknowledgement. And we are now going to talk some about CRT. So, I really want most of our time to be spent with Jackie. So this is going to be like a quick overview. But we will be sharing resources for today in the deck, in the slides. So it's something for folks to continue to refer to. And again, this is like an overview. And some of you may already know these things too, if not all of you. But again, it feels really important to make sure that we are contextualizing before moving on and deeper into the conversation. And so what do we mean by culturally responsive teaching? Well, it became very popular and well-known in institutions through the work of Geneva Gay, Gloria Ladson-Billings, who I got to sit next to on a panel. She was absolutely amazing. And Sonia Nieto and Zaretta Hammond, right? And these are just a few of kind of the women or the mothers of CRT, but the very well-known ones. And if you move kind of fast forward a little bit to 2020, Goldie Muhammad, Dr. Goldie Muhammad, all of these women are doctors of their work, released Cultivating Genius, an equity framework for culturally and historically responsive literacy. And this was a really big deal when this came out because what she was saying was like, well, yeah, this is actually how Black literary society folks would engage around literacy. So this is, really pulling into the culture piece that's already there. And how can we use that and literacy. And she has since released another book that is actually around all the subjects, which is also amazing. And to further kind of go deeper into, again, like, okay, what do we mean by it? We know some of the folks that started it. We know some of their work. In Beyond Flesh-Colored Crayons, the 4 components of culturally relevant pedagogy, Dr. Zaretta Hammond lists 4 key components for CR, in this case P instead of T, and they include affirmation. So as an educator, I recognize and accept you as you are, you being the student. I understand and nurture your multiple identities, and none of these aspects of you are in conflict to me. Another one is validation. So, validate students' experience by the world of acknowledging the socio-political context we live in. Teach the truth about power, politics, history, and context in developmentally appropriate ways, and use these tools as tools of instruction and discourse. And just to go to validation again, like that one's so important, right? So that it's not just a strategy in isolation, but really acknowledging why the strategy even exists. Cognition, so using students' culture as a reference point for helping them understand concepts. This is where learning theory, neuroscience, and culturally responsive teaching all meet up. And processing, so help students hold on to it. Learn about the neuroscience of information processing to support students in internalizing content to the level of automaticity. So when you think of some of these things, they're so connected to the arts. Call and response, music, movement, and storytelling are all culturally relevant ways to create neural pathways. And Zaretta Hammond is really great at getting into the neuroscience of what CRT is. And I'm actually using a National Equity Project resource to speak to these different things, which again will be shared with you. It's already in the slides, which will be shared with you. But this is just a really great kind of, again, fast way to think about, and what is it and what is it not? So again, we've talked about this a little bit. It's a bridge between home and school life. So there isn't this separation. Affirming students' history and culture, centering student voices and learning styles in all lessons and classroom experiences. But what is it not? So it's not confusing race and culture as the same thing. It's not only about motivating students of color. It's not relying on a single method to engage students within a lesson. It's not about mastering all the details of every culture. And it's not just about adding Black or other groups' history to the curriculum. Not that adding the history is a bad thing, but that's not what CRT is, right? So these are also really important things to consider. And if you're feeling a little bit of dissonance, like this is great, hold on to that. Be great to, even if it's in May, like we bring into community of practice, we'll be able to talk through later today. But these are just a few things that we want to point out before jumping in. I think the last piece that is always important for me to talk about when I, as an educator, do talk about CRT is my culture. So this is an areto, and aretos are where the Taino, which are my indigenous ancestors in Boriquen, otherwise known as Puerto Rico, would come together in circle for storytelling, dancing, political conversations, having to make really important decisions as a village. I think I said already, celebrations, right? This is where all of that was already happening. And I actually was at this park this summer. But this was, in the case of my culture, erased, right? The Taíno through the Spaniards. And then they were also attempted to be erased. There is a reason that CRT exists, and that is because of erasure. That is because of oppression, which we've talked about systems of oppression in other sessions. We've talked about cultural wealth models, right? Like these are these wealth models, but I really wanted to take it back to in my case, my indigenous culture, but everyone has one. And really thinking about CRT is reclaiming what's already been alive and well known, but it's not mainstream. There's another mainstream, right, that does not include these stories, it does not include these ways. So I also want to make sure that we're grounding in that socio-political context of why CRT even has to exist for students of color. And with that, I now want to pass it to Jackie.
Thank you. Hi, everybody. I'm excited to get the conversation going. Thank you, Lily, for that great introduction to CRT. In my teaching academy class, we read a lot about Zaretta Hammond. We just finished reading Unearthing Joy by Dr. Goldie Mohammed. So if you all haven't read those pieces, they're amazing. They're beautiful. They teach you a lot. And yeah, it's just some really good stuff there. So thank you for grounding us in that and just saying all those amazing women's names, right? Black women, right? Latina women, and just kind of what precious knowledge they gave us, right? So that we can build better experiences for our community. So I wanted to get started. La cultura cura, which is like the way Lily was saying, culture heals. I think it's important for me to preface, I work in collective. I work with other artists and musicians. And so a lot of the work that I'm going to talk about, like some of it, yes, is my own practice, but it's also what I've done together in community with others. Especially, I'm a co-founder, co-director of 18th Street Casa de Cultura. There's also two other important mujeres, Gina and Maya, who I like to just say their name every time I give a presentation, just to bring them into the space, because it really is something that we kind of thought about and created together, and are building together. So it's really excited to have the opportunity to share that work. So we're going to just show a little bit of examples of building culturally responsive art and teaching practices, not only in the classroom, but also in the community spaces that I'm a part of. So like I said, Jack, we could go back to the other one, sorry. So just wanted to showcase some of the things that we're going to be looking at and talking about. The images that you're going to see is going to be a lot of like kind of the things that I have done or stuff I've done in my classroom or stuff we're doing in different programs that we may have. And with 18th Street Casa de Cultura, we're working in various different schools, doing arts and music integration with those schools in their aftercare programs. But I just kind of wanted to really talk about how the way we kind of see art and music, it really is about, these are tools that we have in our communities. These are tools that we kind of use to really develop cultural identities, not only just like deconstructing our own, but also creating space for our young people, our future generations, our families to also do that too. It's a way kind of how the way we use these practices as a way for decolonization, especially of Latino culture. And just how the way we want to, art and music really play this kind of lucha role, right? Where we are not only talking about our struggles and bringing awareness of our struggles, but how can we use this to make the beauty that we want to see in the world? So yeah, so I come from an organizer background. I was a student organizer. Then I became a teacher. I'm a jaranera. I play this music. When I was younger, the Zapatista movement was something that was very influential for me. These were indigenous people in Chiapas in southern Mexico that kind of rose up and took back their land. And it really kind of exposed me to this world of solidarity, this world of how do we make connections between our struggles and how do we show up for other groups of people? How do we show up for each other? It really taught me a lot. And so all these kind of things play a huge practice. They play an important role in how the way I kind of see art, how the way I kind of see music, especially in these collective spaces that I'm a part of. I just wanted to here we just want to showcase a little bit of the programs that we have. Like I said, we're a group of educators, musicians, artists, really dedicated to cultivating this artistic expression that we have in our communities, right? Our space is located at 2057 West 18th Street on 18th and Hoyne. We are purposely located in Pilsen. If people are not aware of the community, Pilsen, it's a historical Mexicano neighborhood. It's really a center of like arts and culture within our community. And it's also been a neighborhood that's been targeted for a long time for gentrification. So there's things in this neighborhood that when I was younger that no longer exist. We used to have so many cultural spaces, cultural centers, artistic spaces. You would be walking down the street and there would be always like artists like either drawing or painting or printmaking. It was just an explosion of that here. And what gentrification does is what Lily was talking about. It erases a community's kind of legacy of who they are and where they come from. And so just like everybody else during the pandemic, we were all probably, introspective, thinking about the world that we live in. And so a group of us that play the music together, that are educators, that really kind of created all this beautiful programming together. We decided to open up a space that not only celebrates who we are as a people, but also just kind of that historical memory, like the importance of people knowing and understanding that, hey, in this community, these things were born, cultivated, and nourished in. And so it's been a really beautiful process. We just opened up in 2021. But like I said, the work has happened beforehand. And it's been really interesting to go from like kind of doing nomadic arts and music and cultural programming in a various different spaces and now kind of having a hub. So it's been kind of cool to see how we've been kind of growing in that way. Our main approaches that we have is art, cultura, education, and language. I think it's for us, we're mostly working with kind of the Mexicano Latinx community. And something that we kind of see a lot is that a lot of the programming that's offered or the things that are offered to our families, they're not in Spanish or they're not in the languages that we speak. So a lot of the stuff that we do it's about immersion, right? It's about being immersed into your culture, your identity, the languages that are of your people. And the way we kind of build that out and bring that alive is specifically using the tools that we have, which is that art and that music component. So for us, when you're doing art or when you're learning how to play music, you're in an immersed Spanish environment. Obviously, we're bilingual, right? It's open for everybody, but there's something beautiful about, hey, I'm actually in a place where like people say my name right. I'm actually in a place where like I can practice my language, right? I can practice who I am. And it's not just something that just gets stayed home. It's something that's out in the community that you can be a part of. So I think that that's a really beautiful thing. I always like to use myself as an example. I feel I'm very proud of like my Spanish maintenance and my Spanish language acquisition over the years. But a lot of it had to do with the fact that I was immersed in this kind of philosophy and school of thought of how you use art and music as a way to maintain language or learn your language or practice your language, practice your accent. So it's been, I know I'm a testament to it. So it's been kind of beautiful to see that how we're able to create those spaces with children, youth, and families. I was telling Lily that I was hoping that we can have a little bit of dialogue going on in I know it's virtual. It's a little hard, but I wanted just to see, I wanted folks to kind of journal and just to see what their background is or how what are the things that they've experienced, and hopefully we can bring that either into the chat or on the mic. But I was just kind of curious I was hoping we could have time to write. If you guys just want to think about it and you don't want to write or whatever, that's all good. You know, it's whatever makes you comfortable. But when was the first time outside of your home, so not in your home, don't think about your home, that you participated in some type of creative art form? So that could be like theater, a drawing class, or a music class, or whatever, that really reflected who you are, where you learned about your ancestry and your history. And that really just validated your existence. So I'm kind of curious to see if you ever experienced that, and how old were you? When was that for you? And so I'm gonna be 40 in a couple of months. So for me, my example is the first time I've ever experienced that was when I was in college. So when I was 18 years old. So I went my whole formative years never having access to something like that. And I'm the first person in college to go to my family. So that means even the people prior to me never had access to that, right? So I'm just kind of curious how it is for you. So I think we're going to give people a couple of minutes to kind of brainstorm, and then hopefully we can either put it in the chat or you could say it off the mic.
I can start. Hello, everyone. My name's Martha. My answer is kind of an acknowledgement that I was very fortunate to attend primarily a Latino high school. I went to Benito Juarez and Pilsen. And so growing up in Pilsen and going to high school in my neighborhood, validated my experience because I remember I wasn't really at first taking art classes, but I remember there was an art class where students were making calaveras, and those are like little skeletons that represented the Day of the Dead. And so we had a lot of activities that revolved around our heritage, and specifically talking about like Day of the Dead activities and celebration and tradition. And I remember just being really engaged and excited to feel that like there were people talking about my heritage, they were talking about my background, and I felt acknowledged that like in the community that we were in, we were talking about these things, and there were teachers who were open-minded and obviously identified in the Latino community, so they were able to bring that into the classrooms. So I'm grateful for that experience.
Were you with Mr. Vidal?
I didn't get to take a class with Mr. Vidal, but I was I knew he was offering that class. Like I knew in his class they would make the calaveras. So.
Was it with Miss Camacho then? Who did you have?
I had Miss Unger before they retired.
Okay. All right, cool. Oh, that's cool. That's beautiful, right? You know, and I think that I think what Marta kind of brings up is a really interesting point, right? Of the sense of, we have a school where I work at now, Benito Juarez. I've been there for almost 10 years. You know, it was rooted and founded in community, right? So the community wanted these classes and these curricular experiences to represent the students that go there, right? And I think this is what Lily was talking about when CRT, right? When we're creating actual artistic experiences or curricular experiences that represent like the children that go there, the youth that go there, you know, what that does for them, right? How it makes them feel. And just even like Marta expressing herself, like you feel a joy, right? You feel like you belong, you feel validated. So how about anybody else? Thank you, Marta.
I'd love to go next. The first cultural art form that I experienced was, I think I was about 5, and we had a pretty large Black Muslim population in our city, and we attended their one of their mosques for African dance lessons. And that was really exciting. We were not isolated in terms of our specific neighborhood. We were on a small block that was all African American, but the larger part of the city was predominantly white. So my sister was actually the first child to integrate the elementary school that was in our district. And and then 3 years later, when I joined, we both had to deal with a lot of racist stuff because the school had been white for many years before we got there.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing. I think that that's like a very, right, you know, it's a very powerful experience. Like when you can, you know, recall 5 years old, right? Where it's just like, I experienced this program, I experienced this moment, and like just kind of what it made you feel. I think that it's really beautiful too. And then also connect that specifically to the history of your family, right? Of how they play this role of integration. I think that that's a beautiful component. It just ties nicely together. Is there anybody else? We could probably take one more.
I can share from my perspective. I really appreciate you guys sharing. I just you actually a memory came back just from hearing the interactions. I remember living in a neighborhood where we were all integrated. So we had Spanish speaking neighbors, and then there was us, and there were no barriers because we couldn't speak the same language. We still played in the same pool together. We still played with the same toys. We still did many of the same activities. So I never had, unfortunately, I never had the idea of a difference. You know, it's just, okay, they just speak a different language. Going to school and growing up, thankfully, our school had many artistic experiences that they exposed us to: art, visual arts, as well as music, as well as dance and things like that. Especially back in the day, I don't want to date nobody's age, but they used to have merit band, you know, where you can go to play the musical instruments, and I played the flute. So I always had exposure, but it does take a teacher to sometimes bring that out in you. Because I remember, excuse me, Ava, I'm sorry, that's my 4-year-old goddaughter. I remember in first grade, this is before I really even thought about artistic expression. I remember my teacher saying, "Hey, I want you to lead this song at the recital." And of course, I had no idea what that would entail, but I'm 45, gonna be 46 Sunday, and I still have that memory in my mind of singing Tevin Campbell's Tomorrow on stage in first grade with Miss Allen. And Miss Allen also, because of the socioeconomic status that we had at that time, she also took me to the mall and bought me a dress and made me feel special. And those things resonated with me. And that same feeling that I had at that time is my reason why I do what I do in our community. And now that we do have integrated students, meaning we have Spanish speaking students in our school, I'm on day 160 of Duolingo because I am trying to communicate. I am trying to give them that advantage. I am trying to teach them. I would appreciate CPS if they would give us some classes, but it's my responsibility to be the best teacher that I can for my students in my art class. So all of my students deserve the opportunity to learn, and all of my students deserve the opportunity to express themselves in their way. And many of my Spanish speaking students come in and they are so artistic, and they come in and they draw every day and they create art, and I hang it around the room. I want them to know that they're special and that they matter, and they mean the world to us. I even have, making sure that I have the Spanish version of the word, the English version of the word. So the English speaking students are learning Spanish, and the Spanish speaking students are learning English. So it is a struggle at this time trying to do it on your own, but you do what you can do until something else is available. Thank you, guys.
That was the presentation. That was so beautiful. You had me crying too. I mean, I just think that, yes, like, we have a very, I'm a teacher too, so we have a very hard job right now. And it's just so beautiful how when we integrate art, regardless if we're an art teacher or not, when we integrate art into community, into our classroom, into our spaces, and how we just validate each other and us being together, just like what it makes you feel. And that's kind of why I wanted you guys to kind of think about yourself first and what it made you feel and what it gave you, because your students and our youth, they deserve that feeling, right? They need that feeling too. You loved it. It's infectious. It's, you want to give that. And so, where I'm at in my teaching practice, it's more about like, what experiences am I creating? What space am I helping to open up so that, we are just, we're being critical of what's happening in the world around us. We're being critical of what we're coming in, but man, like, let's make some beauty for this world too, because it deserves it, and you deserve it too, right? Let's move on to the next one. Thank you so much, everybody, for sharing. Some of these are kind of things we already touched upon, but I wanted to introduce kind of this concept of funds of knowledge. This is something that's really, really important to us. This is Amal Amanti and Gonzalez, just to add some more scholarship and some more thinking and learning around where they really, the work that they presented and kind of what we build a lot around is that our children, our youth, our young people, they come to our spaces with knowledge. They're not these empty vessels. They have something that they bring with them. They have their identity. They have their culture. They have their experiences in their neighborhood. My family, I'm a daughter of inmigrantes, right? Immigrants. I have a whole other, I have a whole other a country and a whole other culture that I come from as well. But I grew up here, right? So I have these two worlds that I navigate. And so how do we really bring all those stuff? How do we bring those things into our classroom? And how do we integrate the arts into that? Next. And so, for us, it's really about curricular themes. So building the art around curricular themes, and these curricular themes can really help to strengthen just a lot of the identity of our students and how the way they feel about themselves, how they see something reflected of themselves and what that gives them. But then also kind of what Lucille's talking about, right? You're purposely making your classroom about English and Spanish, right? So that both of these students, right, regardless of the language, they have a way to that's like a window, right? That's a way to see into the other students' eyes or their world or their experience, and really in how our spaces can really do that, whether that's in a traditional, like in the classroom setting, or in after school, or in a community program. The next one. I want to talk about just kind of the type of themes that we put together here, or and the things that we do here at Street Casa de Cultura, but also what I do in the classroom as well. We have these kind of like, not just, we look at Freire a lot for like generated themes that are kind of generated by the people in or the community that our young people are coming from. But we also kind of do a lot of what's cultural themes, right? Themes that are kind of more about how can we dive deep, decolonize, not just scratch the surface, but really go deep, right? That deep culture that Dr. Zaretta Hammond talks about, right? And how can we utilize art to really kind of bring that alive and create that space so that the young people feel comfortable and feel safe to go into that and to do that? And how do we really like start integrating art into math, art into history, art into English, right? So that we can also have these different experiences. Our children can have these different experiences with the curriculum. We can go to the next one. We're going to go into very specific examples. I don't think we don't have enough time to do the second journal, but I just kind of want to pose this to you all so you guys can think about. CRT is talking about erasure. Our cultural center, a lot of the reason why it's here is because of that. You all have been saying some things about it too. So it's kind of like, how do we undo erasure, right? And how can the arts, the thing that we love, right? The things that we're a part of, really help us on that path. And Lily was talking about a little bit when she brought in her cultura, her culture. But in Latinidad, there has been an historical and purposeful erasure of indigeneity and Blackness within our culture, within our ethnicities, within our races in this geographic region of Latin America and the Caribbean. So for us, it's something that's very important in our mind, and it's part of the decolonization of Latinidad. You have to understand these things. And we like to use art, music, and kind of even our language to showcase and educate, not educate, but create spaces where families and children can learn about these presencias, these roots, these ancestries that exist within Latinidad. So we're going to start kind of going into examples.
And Jackie, I also just want to say we do have some time to journal if you want to.
I think it's okay. I think let's
Okay.
just go into the examples and then I'm going to do the pauses. So I think we'll be fine.
Okay, sounds good.
Yeah. But yeah. So my first example I wanted to use was kind of, a lot of people know about Dia de Muertos, Day of the Dead, and it became it's a really interesting thing that's happened with Dia de Muertos. I love the movie Coco, but since the movie Coco, we have seen a huge commodification and capitalistic way of practicing this tradition. And what a lot of people don't know is that, if we could go to the next slide, is that this is a community indigenous cultural practice, especially in Mexico. And so it's kind of hard to sometimes when I'm in the store at Target and I see all these things and I'm just like, oh my God, what is this? But it's also, with the times, right, that we're kind of in. And so with our space, what we like to do is, how do we still honor the practices that already exist in our community that have been here, with people who do practice indigenous ways of living and building and ceremony, and how does if you're going to have a space in the community, how do you make sure you're open to that, to allow that to happen? So for Dia de Muertos, there's within the Aztec tradition, the Mexica tradition, we have something, we have ceremony, flor y canto, singing and praying, and really trying to bring in our ancestors in that spirituality and honoring them in that way. And so if you guys can see right here, we have the altar, the altar, and really allowing for community to have that expression and have that moment, artistically, musically, spiritually, so that they can honor their loved ones in the ways that they know how, and where the ways that this tradition comes from, right? One of its roots. If we go to the next one. And then, we usually don't stop there. We usually go into, how does this look for children and family? How do we think about literature? How do we think about music? How do we think about language, right? Teaching our children the elements, the directions, right? Teaching our children about how you make the flowers, the cempasúchil. What is the different levels of the altar about? Why do we put the photos of our ancestors there? What are when we work with the flower and we make an image or a symbol, what does that mean, right? Where does that come from? And what's our legacy, right? What is our ancestral legacy, our ancestral greatness that gives us this, right? That gives us this beautiful ceremony that we get to participate in. We can go to the next one. And then for me and my practice, I have a, when you're working, I mostly work with Mexicano, Latino students, right? And like, again, I always go back to the pandemic because it just changed a lot of things for me and for a lot of the work that we do. And it's kind of like, how do we utilize who we are, right? What makes up our identity, and how do we build in intersectionality and solidarity with that? So I created this, it's called the Black Lives Matter ofrenda, or the Black Lives Matter altar. This was something we did during the pandemic. The school still does it. They just pick different themes every year, which is fine because that's what a lot of people do for Dia de Muertos. Their altares are different themes. And basically, it was these kits that all the students came to pick up at the school. It was pretty powerful. And we had this really great conversation around, okay, if Dia de Muertos is about honoring people who have passed away, how do we start learning and really investigating kind of what we're seeing in the news and the media, what's happening? How do we learn about implicit bias? How do we learn about misrepresentation, right? How do we teach news literacy skills, right? But at the same time, making this beautiful artistic component that's integrated into it so that the students feel like, hey, this is something I know, I recognize. I make an altar in my own home, and now I'm learning how to do it in a different way to honor this Black person, right, that we have lost to police and state violence. And really learning about how the way the media portrays these stories, and how do you correct that, right? How do you correct the media? How do you correct that just like the inhumanity that sometimes we see in our reporting that we see in our society. And so students also wrote what are called calaveritas that are not, a lot of people don't know about that part with Dia de Muertos, where it's like poetry, it's a calavera. And so a lot of the students, if they had George Floyd, if they had Laquan McDonald, they're gonna write a calaverita about what happened to them in a non-biased way, right? One that builds in humanity, one that builds in solidarity. So it was really powerful. And it was really the first time, I mean, I'm pretty sure some of you, if you were teaching there in that time, the students never had their cameras on. So it was the first time where the students turned on their cameras and they're just like, hey, I wanted to show you the altar that I had in my house, my ofrenda that I have in the house, and look at the one that I made for Breonna Taylor, right? And to me, it was just such a powerful moment as a Mexicana to see how they had, Breonna Taylor, a part of their families right next to their great grandfather or their grandfather that passed away, right? Or if you could see in these pictures, Laquan McDonald right next to La Virgen de Guadalupe. For Mexicano people, La Virgen de Guadalupe is a very sacred figure. So for the students to make these choices, it just really is a beautiful, sacred way to see how the way they were really internalizing not just the history component or the academic component, but also that artistic component. And yeah, I wanted to pause there to see if people have any comments or reactions before I move on to the next example. And I had to do the Black Lives Matter ofrenda, or just to learn how to make the altar out of paper. There's a video of me of showing how to do it. I could give all that stuff to Lily and she can share that with you guys if you're interested. I also have the kit of like the cempasúchil flowers and the papel picado. Like I have all that. So you guys, if you want those things, I can definitely share that with you. If there's no other comments or people, we can move on to the next example. nuestra raíces, our roots. So again, right, for us, it's just super important. And for just me in my practice, is like, if I'm responsible to help develop generations of future teachers, right? Some of my students want to be art teachers, they want to be math teachers, they want to be all these different things, right? English teachers. Like, I have to also we also have to go through a whole other process of what's your por qué, what's your why, what's your purpose, why are you doing this? Who are you going to be working for? Who are you serving, right? And what experiences are we giving our students in, my world is always in Chicago public schools, but obviously, wherever they decide to work, right? Let's go to so we could show some examples. So with our space, it's really important, my family comes from Mexico, right? My family has been on that land for generations. I'm indigenous to Mexico, right? Our people that migrate here, they're indigenous to somewhere. Everybody's indigenous to somewhere, kind of what Lily was saying in the beginning. And so what are those things that we have connected, right? We're on land that is, this is not my homeland, right? This is not my ancestral home. But how is it where I'm from and where I practice, how is that connected to here? So for us, it's really about how do we celebrate those beautiful things within Latinidad, right? The things that we have in common, like the directions, our connection to our land, creating a more positive experience with the land, right? Especially for different groups of people, the land is a very negative thing for them, right? So how do we deconstruct that and create a new narrative for that, right? How do we also, if you guys can see the song right here, Tierra Mi Cuerpo, how also are we using where we come from? How are we also exposing our children to kind of things that they're a part of, right? Linguistically, right? Spanish, English, and here we have Nahuatl. Nahuatl is the largest speaking indigenous language in Mexico. Mexico has over like 60 indigenous languages, right? But so much of Spanish, especially Mexican Spanish, and this is the same thing for a lot of Spanishes in Latin America, they're so connected to indigenous language and indigenous words, right, of the people there. So if we go to the next one, so kind of like how are we creating through song, through art, them having access to those words, to those kind of like ways of being and living. So these are some books. Some of the things that we work with a lot with our families and our children is working and doing art with seeds, doing art with grains. And the reason why is because these things come from the Americas, right? These things come from where we're from, right? Our legacy, our ancestry. There's this beautiful song that we like to perform and play where it's called Somos Palabras Nahuatl. Somos Palabras Nahuatl, Somos Palabras Nahuatl. Dime tus palabras, right? Tomate, chile, aguacate, elote. These are all words that even in English we're using, right? We use the word avocado, we use the word tomato, we use the word cacahuate, chile, right? But these are Nahuatl words. These are indigenous rooted words from Mesoamerica, right? From specifically Mexico. And so I think that those are really, it's a way to learn through the art, through the music, and through that language that we were saying. It's a really way for young people and for other people to be like, dang, when I say avocado, I'm saying, when I say aguacate, I'm saying an indigenous word right there. And it's like, yes, you are. You know what I mean? So I think it's a really powerful thing. We can go to the next one. And then I think the way a good connector for especially in the classroom or bridging art and content into the classroom is oral history, right? That's just a common factor amongst a lot of groups, a lot of different people. The importance of storytelling, right? And you could do the traditional, like, what are those oral history skills? Teaching students how to make questions, right? Having them transcribe, having them translate, all those different things, right? You can do all that beautiful jazz. But in this specific activity, We're kind of teaching the art of the repujado, which is it's basically tin embossing. It's a very beautiful practice that's in Latin America. You see it a lot in Mexicano folklore art, where it's like tin metal that has been embossed. And then I mix that with the seeds, right? And the students right here, they're really picking a symbol from that oral history that represents who they were talking about. So a lot of the students always they pick their mom or their dad, or they pick that motherly figure for them. And I'm like, hey, you asked to do this interview, you learned a lot about who you are and where you come from. Let's gift, right? That practice of reciprocity, right? Let's give something to this person. So what is something in that interview? What's a symbol, or what's something that represents that person that that they would love, right? That would mean something for them, and like, let's do it in this format. And it's a aluminum tin. It's like a higher grade. It's just Sharpie markers, and it's and it's beans and grains. So that's kind of what. And we put it on cardboard. But you guys can, everybody can do it a little differently. Some people like putting it on like the harder canvas, not um the canvas boards, opposed to just like loose canvas. But yeah. Before we go into Afro Latinidad, I just want to make sure that if there's any questions or anything coming to people. We're good. Okay, we could go to the next one. I wanted to give examples because I know we were going to have artists and teachers and all these different things, and I know we love that stuff. So I just wanted to make sure I gave as much examples of how the way we do what we do, right? Another one is called, I think this is something I'm very proud of. Not only as a group or as a collective, we explore the beauty of indigeneity, but just like also the beauty of just like Blackness within Latinidad. Like, to me, that is something that I feel very honored that we do that work, and we do that work not only in English but also in Spanish. And it's something that is much needed in our society, right? How are we building solidarity, especially in a city like Chicago, right? How are we building solidarity between these communities? And how can we utilize our ancestry? How can we utilize where we come from to really build that and bridge that? And it's super, super, super important and much needed work. So we'll go into some examples. There's some beautiful books for little ones. There's a whole collection now with youth and middle schoolers of just skin colors, tones. How do we share that literacy with our little ones, right? And have that, and do that storytelling with them. This book right here, Niña Bonita, is a beautiful book. It's a book in Spanish. There's other books as well that are like, they're in Spanish, but they've been translated into English. We can talk about that. But also too, with the music that I play that you saw in the beginning, that's an Afro-Indigenous music from Mexico, right? So how do we talk about those two identities, and how that all happened, right? So through the music, whether we're teaching young people how to play, or how to write verses, or whatever, there's just so much secretism, cultural secretism. We like to focus that a lot. And how do we use instruments, and how do we use, if you could see right here, to showcase the Black identity, the Black presence within Latin America and the Caribbean. And then also too, there are words in Spanish that are African rooted, right? So a lot of times our communities do not know these things. And so when you're creating a space, right, whether that's in the classroom or in a cultural center, and you're just like, wow, I'm just like learning all these things, right? Not only the impact that it has on that family and that child and that young person, but just also the impact that it's going to have as it transcends out the doors, right? So words like fandango, wapango, mambo, mofongo, marimba, right? These are all African rooted words that we say in a Spanish accent, but we don't know that, right? Just the same thing with those indigenous words that I was kind of showcasing in the other slides. We say them, but we don't, but a lot of our community doesn't know that that isn't it. You're basically saying a Nahuatl word. You're basically saying an indigenous word. We can go to the next one. I wanted to end with this. I put that in the chat. You guys can, it's something that we created. Maya did a beautiful job of creating these beautiful resources, looking at music, ingredients, places, and women, Afro-Latinas. We're a women cultural center. We're a women-led cultural center. So we're going to talk about the mujeres all day. And so these are beautiful resources that you can print. My husband, he's a punk. I'm very much influenced by the DIY scene. So we have these beautiful zines that you guys can share with your students. They are in English and in Spanish. I also created some lessons in English and Spanish for our young people can really explore these things, right? And I love to do this. Well, I love to do it all the time, but I like to explore Afro-Latinidad, especially during Black History Month. But you can also do it during Women's History Month. You can also do it during Indigenous, Heritage Month, Latino Heritage Month. Like however you want to like culturally fit it for your calendar of what you're doing. It just fits everywhere, right? I mean, to me, it's just something that should be just taught all day, every day. But that's just me. But the beautiful thing about it is like it's all centered around art and music, and these women that we kind of highlight here, they're like poets, they're filmmakers, right? And it's just for people to see just the greatness of this diversity that exists in Latin America, and how we can relate to that and how we can connect to that. And kind of like what Lucille says, like language shouldn't be a barrier, right? We should find other ways of speaking and engaging with one another and like learning, right, each other. And I think that's a really beautiful thing that grounded us in this conversation. That's all I had to share. I hope it was helpful. I don't know if anybody else has comments or questions or anything. I'm also down to, if anybody ever wants to talk or meet up and brainstorm anything that they want to do, whether the classroom or in an after school program, like I'm down too, so.
We definitely have time for questions. So if folks want to jump in with any, this would be the time.
Yeah, and so the zine, Emily, there's also like a video of how the way you fold it. I don't know if people have done zines, but we're basically using a pocket zine style. And I've done pocket zines with my classes when we're looking at like historical figures, when we're looking at social movements, right? Just a really cool way to like spread information. One time I did a really cool project. This was, I started teaching in 2009. So this was probably like in 2010. I had a group of young people. We were doing different social movements, right? Different like, luchas in Chicago and in Latin America. And so some kids had like the Young Lords Party. They had the Black Panthers. They had Fred Hampton. They had all these different people. And so we're just like, okay, well, that's the beauty of a zine, right? A zine is a mass production, right? It's you print it out. And so what they did was we started printing a whole bunch out, and then we had a map of the CTA, like the bus lines and the train lines. I don't know if they give those maps out anymore, but back in the day, they used to give those maps out. And so what we would do was like, well, okay, you're gonna go on because they were already gonna go on the bus and then the train, like, where are you gonna drop like our propaganda, if you want to call it. And so they would come back into the classroom and we would open it up and be like, hey, like, where did you drop it off today? Man, I went on here, I went on the CTA. I went on the pink line, or I went on the, on the red line, and I left these here and I left them. And so we would like push pin where, yes, the girl are, yeah, that's that punk background. We would push pin like where people are at, and we're like, oh, where didn't we go? Why are we not going over there? Like, let's go over there. Let's leave it on Cottage Grove, like train line, right? So it was just kind of it was kind of a really cool project to get like the kids into like, hey, it's not just about learning and having that validation. It's about how do we spread that to the masses, and how do we keep creating these beautiful, safe spaces for a lot of people, right? And yeah, so yeah, there's a lot of things that I think about a lot, in the sense of it's, I have we have a really great friend, he's always talking about like, if I have a knowledge, right? What does it do for me if I don't share it? Obviously, he says this in Spanish, but I'm trying to translate it in a good way. And I'm just like, yeah, that's really interesting. Like, what does it do for me to just keep it for myself, right? If I know how to work in this way, and I know how to build in this way, why am I just doing it for myself, right? So yeah, I think Emily, you wanted to say something.
Yes, I lost my self view, so now I don't know what I look like. Oh my gosh. Two things. First, that something I've been thinking, just related to what you just said, something I've been discussing with my own cohort of teaching artists is, for those of us who identify as teaching artists, teaching is an element of our artistry, not just something we also do in addition to our artistry. But as an artist, part of my goal is to pass these skills on to the next generation and make sure they understand them. But what I really started with was thinking about, I've ended up in a lot of cultures where I don't speak the language and I'm teaching movement, and that baseline body part, identify location in space, has been such a great learning tool for me and my students as a teaching artist, to just be like, okay, hands front, right? And then we try, how many interesting different ways can we put our hands in front? But for me, like working in Asian language cultures where I don't even have, like, I speak enough Spanish that I can communicate, but I don't have any Asian language basis. So I was learning their words, they were learning my words, but also that body part thing is like such an important piece of the language for me as a teacher to understand, that it's been really valuable in that way too.
That's awesome. There's this, I'm gonna put this in the chat. The Teatro Trono. It's a theater group in Bolivia, and how they use movement and all that to talk about decolonization not only of our body, but of our culture and our identity. I think it would be a really cool resource. And I think it's really interesting how they utilize the arts, right? You can make a lot of connections with Theater of the Oppressed and all that with them. But I just think it's really interesting how the way they kind of build that identity with young people, with communities, and like basically in Bolivia. And we have they have had a historical relationship with us here in Chicago. And it's always kind of powerful to see these young people, or all these generations, and how the way they, like present themselves, and how the way they're not timid, they're not shy, they kind of radiate a beauty about who they are and where they come from. And it has a lot to do with that philosophy of teaching movement. So yeah. I'm not too sure if anybody else has any other questions or thought. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I thought I thought I was like behind. So I kind of just started running through it.
It is all good. But yes, this is a great time for folks to jump in with any questions. And this is also a great time for folks to jump in and share so much gratitude and love for Jackie and everything that she shared about what she has done, does, all the things, and just sharing so generously and so openly with us. So let's please give Jackie some love if we haven't already. Because there's labor involved too in putting it all together and sharing it in this space.
Yeah, I wanted to say thank you, Jackie, for sharing all of the resources and examples of things that can be incorporated. I primarily work in the nonprofit sector supporting teaching artists. So I look at a lot of outline course proposals and curriculum that teaching artists are proposing for classes that we offer here. And so I'm wondering, what is an approach to suggesting like the implementation of more of this political sort of historical resources? Because I feel like a lot of people, because everything has become so political, have steered away from introducing these sort of topics in their curriculum. And I want to encourage folks to like embed some of those history, some of their knowledge, and alongside with the skills that they're implementing with young people. So how do you approach that as you're talking to teaching artists?
That's such a great question. Right now, we're currently in a couple of schools, and I have a few teaching artists, not only for the arts but also for music. So we're kind of working with two grammar schools and an alternative high school. And we're really focusing kind of what the schools want to see. So a lot of the schools, they want to see bilingual arts, right? They want to see culture being represented somehow, especially in the after school setting. And for some schools, they want to have like that. They want to especially do that identity work. And I always talk about with my young people, a lot of them want to go to college, right? And they want to go into these spaces and these institutions that don't historically represent them. And I always kind of say, when you have such a strong, positive cultural identity of yourself, it really does, for me, it really doesn't matter what other people look like or what they're saying to you or how they might dismiss you. But when that is strong and firm in you, like you're going to bulldoze through that, right? And I really do think that that's where the arts really play a role in how do you build that positive, that positive identity of yourself, and how the way it makes you feel and how the way it validates not only your greatness, but your ancestry's greatness too, right? So that's kind of how the way when we're working with the teaching artists, we kind of work with it through that lens. And what are those great like art projects or those great things that we're going to do that can kind of help bring that out, right? So for example, mask making is such a, just culturally for so many cultures, it means a lot to a lot of people, especially mask making in Latino culture. And so a lot of people do their different versions of it, but, pulling from really powerful masks or ancient masks from like different indigenous groups in the Americas, kind of using that, understanding what those are about. And then how do we create, what's the mask of who we are, right? Like, who are we? What is our identity? What am I proud of? Where do I come from? And it's super cool. So that first picture in the beginning of the slides, I don't know if you guys saw a young boy wearing a mask, because he's building his, right? And masks means different things for different culturas, for different cultures. And so it's kind of cool to see how you can make meaning from that. We're also going to do wheat pasting. And so what are the things that are happening in our communities, right? I think also too, so much that's happening right now in our current political climate about people of color, about immigrants, about removing of DEI, diversity spaces, right? Inclusion. These are all things that people fought for, right? Our communities fought for. And so now it's being erased, trying to erase that. And so kind of like how do we, our young people carry that with them? They see that, they talk about it. You know, I don't know how it was for you guys, but the beginning of this quarter in my school, you know, there was days where we had like 48% attendance, right? A population of over 1,600 students. And it's just like, how can, that was about that question. How can we utilize this beautiful skill that we have, whether that's movement, whether that's music, whether that's art, to allow our young people to share what they feel, right? And to, they're obviously feeling something. They're not coming to school, right? They're scared to, or I had a lot of students email me saying, oh, I can't come to school today because I'm scared of my status. And so, you know, these are real things, or, you know, I'm trying not to get emotional, but when moms come up to you and they're like, hey, this is the number right here, right? If something was to happen to me. And so I think these are real things. And just because we may not know fully about all of it, how can we learn with our students, right? How can we make the space stick to a medium that you feel very comfortable in, and be like, hey, you know, I want you guys to kind of express yourself through this, right? Of what you feel, whether that's poetry writing, whether that's you're great at making reels and documentation, right? Or whatever that may be. We mostly lend towards the artes plásticas, arte popular, kind of like just using everyday things that you find to make art, whether that's like cardboard, you know, things of that nature, because that's just kind of more of our background. But yeah, I hope that helped to answer the question. I kind of want to share something with you of how the way I kind of plan it out with not only teaching artists, but with teachers too.
Yeah, thank you so much. Yeah, I think it was a very insightful and reflective of the types of conversations we have in preparation for creating our curriculum, and how we can kind of inspire and motivate other folks to also implement things in their practice that are speaking to things that are happening in everyday life, but how can we still connect with each other and make space for those conversations? I think that's a really powerful tool. So thank you for sharing that.
No problem. So in the link, and you know, everybody can take a look at it, I kind of put a document, kind of how the way we do those themes. I don't know if there's a way to project that, Lily. But this is kind of I'm giving you guys my little secret. This is something that, you know, it's okay. We all artists here. We all educators. You know what I'm saying? We trying to do it for the people. Oh wait, it's the link in the chat that I just put in right now. Or did I copy and paste the same one? I'm sorry.
What do you see on the screen?
I see the verses, but
oh yeah, wrong screen. Hold on. Here we go.
And you know, this is something that if you could go to the top page, this is something that we, you know, if you all are interested, and you know, I'm pretty sure Lily will give you my contact and stuff. You can hit me up about this. So this is kind of how the way I do those cultural themes, and how we build it all out. We started a summer camp. We haven't done it in the past couple of years, but the summer camp was called Soñarte. Basically song and music. No, song and art. Or music and art. It's just, you know, it's hard to translate in English. Sorry. And one of the themes that we had, because of what was happening at that time with the No DAPL, the oil pipelines that were being built on indigenous territories, especially with the Lakota, they started that whole Water is Life campaign movement. And, you know, it was a very big, powerful thing. I don't know if folks remember about that, just kind of where we were at politically and how Obama was transitioning and, you know, stop the pipeline, right? So we wanted to, you know, we kind of took that and went into a world of, well, we have the Great Lakes, right? We have 20% of the world's freshest water in our backyard, right? And like, kind of what is our responsibility? And, you know, what is the role of water in our life, right? So kind of taking the water is life component and then making it into el agua es vida. And then from there, you kind of start building with your artists that overarching essential question of what is it that, what's the goal here? What are we trying to do? And for us, it's just like, we have these young kids who are going to be exploring their identity, their ancestry, their connection to the land. And so how do we protect and defend the land? How are we in solidarity with the indigenous peoples here in this specific country? And so one of my things that I like to do is I like to create acronyms, right? Something that you're building on per week, artistically, academically. And so if you guys see here, it's agua, which is water, right? So, and then each week we kind of have a sub theme, which is agradecer, which is to give thanks, right? That's the A. The G is, what did I say? Generations, right? It's all connected with with these kind of ways of thinking and ways of living. Then the next one is unidos, united, and then acuerdos, agreements. At the end of the camp, it was all about, or you could see it as the end of the unit or at the end of the program. What were those agreements and how the way we are going to protect and defend water, right? Things that are precious to us. So it's not just, and all that they're doing is they're doing art, music, and language work as they're learning about these themes. And I think in there I have some examples of how the different art projects we were doing and stuff like that. But that's kind of how the way I kind of build it out. And it's not just me doing that. That's that collective process that I was talking about, where it's just like, hey, you know, I thought of it this way. What do you guys think? Oh, maybe we should use another word because it works better with the theme, right? Stuff of that nature. So that's my little gem that I want to share with y'all. So it's just like, think about all the things that you would probably want to talk about artistically, right? And it's just like, oh, okay, we want to talk about freedom. Then you do 4 weeks and you could think of the word free, 4 weeks of free. What's that? What's F going to be about? What's the week of F going to be about? And then the kids are like, ooh, what are we spelling out? You know what I mean? Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, you know, it's just like, what's the word? What, you know, and then when we get to the last week, they're like, oh, that's the word, you know, like, you see what I'm saying? Like, it's making me, you know, and it's just the school, you know, I grew up in a community, you know, I grew up with elders that they're always like, why are you doing this art piece, right? Or why are you doing this? Or, you know what I'm saying? And it just like, that's just kind of where we grew up from. And it's a big history. It's a big legacy here in this community. And I know for some people, they don't necessarily see art or music in that way, and that's fine. But just for us, that's just how the way we kind of grew. We kind of were like embedded in that way with when it comes to this way of integrating with kind of, you know, curriculum in schools.
Thank you, Jackie, for that example. Very concrete example and for sharing it.
Yes, in Canada, yes. Mm-hmm. Okay, sorry.
Oh, it's all good.
Does anybody have any other questions? What are your best tools for bringing other cultures, histories, and arts into primarily white classrooms? What are some ways to frame the material so non-POC can experience and honor other cultures without being, okay. Yeah, that's a really great question. We through the space, we actually get a lot of field trips from schools from like Evanston, from just different areas. Um, a lot of sometimes teachers who teach Spanish to predominantly like non, just like they're not heritage classes. They come through, and I think it's about kind of like pulling those resources and kind of um, building in that curiosity with those students. Um, I think people get told a lot that they should learn Spanish, right? That it'll be good for them for their career or whatever. But it's I think it's really interesting when you start to kind of learn like the cultures that kind of make up that, right? Or why do these people speak Spanish, or where did that come from, right? And kind of leaning in on that. And then I also like it when kind of schools either go to like the Mexican Fine Arts Museum, or they go to the Puerto Rican Cultural Center, or they go to Segundo Reyes Buevas Cultural Center, or La Escuelita Bombera de Corazon, or 18th Street Casa de Cultura, because it's really about that teacher or that artist or whatever is really trying to make an intentional like bridge between community and their students, so that their students can see like, hey, this is a something that's living, it's alive. It may not be your everyday reality, but it is for these other people. And I think that that's a really powerful I think that's a really powerful thing. And I think that because when you kind of create those experiences of authenticity, it helps for that appropriation to not happen, right? It helps for it to be something genuine. Because me, I want to talk in Spanish with everybody. You know what I'm saying? Like I want people to feel comfortable with like learning about who I am, and I want to learn about who you are, right? Like I want to do that. And I feel like when you build that authenticity and that genuine experience for kids or for people regardless of their background, it's really hard for them to kind of look at it in any other way. I feel where it's like the whole Cinco de Mayo situation that we're gonna have in a couple of months, but it's okay. We're gonna figure it out. I hope that answered your question.
It does, but what about when and I'm thinking about, I have several relatives who teach in rural white areas where they don't have any access to visiting the cultures they're studying. So I'm trying to build some resources for them to say like, okay, we're going to learn about Day of the Dead, and it's not going to turn into you thinking it's just entirely about sugar skulls, and that's the entire story.
Yeah. I think it's really interesting. As a cultural center, we there's different programs that we have here. So obviously we have the Son Chiquitos program, where it's mostly tailored towards little ones and and their families, and exploring their identity and who they are through music and art, right? And then there's the stuff that we do in the classrooms and after school settings with art and music. So we have like different things that we do. But a lot of times, because we're also, we're also performing, right? We also perform kids music, and we also perform son jarocho, right? So a lot of times, rural areas, rural districts, for their Latin Heritage Month or whatever it is that they are putting together, because their schools are starting to kind of open up, right? They're starting to try to figure out, how do I do this, right? A lot of times the reason why that's happening is because they have a growing migrant population. They have a growing agricultural population, of little kids that are going to those schools that might be Mexicano, they might be from Guatemala, they might be from El Salvador, but they're part of the migrant farming communities. And so I think it's been really powerful to see how schools, when they invite us, they're thinking about it in their head about, I really want those students to be seen that are in the population, but I also want to make sure that I'm creating space, so that kind of what you were saying, kind of for people to also see who we are as Mexican people, or who we are as as part of the Latina community, it's different. It's not like you're saying sugar skulls and all that stuff. But I do think that I think it's just how the way you're building the relationship also too with the students. I think that, when you're doing this work, people are going to come already with their biases. They might already come with their prejudices. They might already come with all those things already. And I know it's hard work, but I think that that's kind of part of, if we want to do this, it's part of the job of how do I deconstruct that with my students? What do I talk about and how do I present it in a different way? And as artists and as teachers, we kind of have control a little bit over of how the way they get to interact with it and engage with it. For example, like for me in my own community, there's a lot of stuff that my students say that is like, what did you just say? And so, we got to break that down. We're like, oh, we're not going to go nowhere in this curriculum. We're not going to do no project until we figure this out. Right. And I think I think it's okay to be that. I mean, that's always been my experience. I don't know no other way.
Um,
Um,
And I wanted to highlight Jenny Hermosa dropped in a question twice because I think she had one up at the top, but and Caitlin added a question, but I also think Mars is adding something really important here too.
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sorry. I'm looking at the questions. My apologies.
Yeah. Can I, before you jump in, Jackie, for the questions, I have a thought also about what Mars is saying, which I think is something that comes up for me sometimes too, because I also wonder, like, what is the culture? Like, white students have a culture too. They have their own culture. Do they know that culture? Like, do they know that history? Because I think sometimes when there's always somebody else's culture as culture, I am using the word culture a lot. That's where I think it can get really tricky. And what are we saying is culture? And I think that's why Zaretta Hammond, when she said culture is not race, right? Like all of us have a culture. All of us have indigenous ancestors. When I think of like the Appalachian like culture and that music and why there is an Appalachian culture, what happened there, what happened, a lot of it goes back for white folks to Europe, right? I think there's some responsibility to learn your own before you're learning others. And I think it's harder, but I also think like necessary. Because otherwise I think that's where it gets really tricky to the piece that I think Mars is saying. That really resonates a lot with me.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I think it's, we technically the music that we play is considered in the in kind of the and when you're in the United States, it's technically considered like a folk music. And so it's really interesting. And this is kind of why we get invited to different rural areas. Because a lot of those people see so much similarity between clogging, between just different ways of just different musical genres that might exist in kind of folk America. And I think that it's really nice. It's really nice to use music and art as a way to kind of build a space to kind of have an exchange and to have encounters with one another. And in a way that seems more kind of genuine, I feel. I think that I don't want to act like I'm the expert because I also gonna learn from you all too, and I'm just kind of just sharing the things I do, but I don't know if like people like that, you know what I'm saying? Like, y'all, I'm pretty sure you all are like creating your own good stuff too that you could share with each other as a cohort, right? But Jenny, I think that's a really great question. I feel like that's what a lot of Zaretta Hammond talks about, is about how do we make space? And I think Dr. Mohammed talks about it too when you read her books, it's really about how we're making and designing that space for them to kind of express who they are. You know what I mean? So if I'm looking at the masks, right, as that example, my questions that I might have are just like kind of what are symbols that represent you, that represent where you come from? What do you want to learn more about who you are, right? So it's not necessarily attached to a specific cultural identity. It's more like, hey, if I gave this to a person, like they're gonna dig deep and dive. Like, who are the people that you need to talk to kind of learn a little bit more about this or that, right? And having them kind of more facilitating an experience opposed to being like I'm the person that's the expert in giving the answer. I don't know if that kind of helped you there in that situation, but that's kind of what I'm talking about. And I think it's also thinking about, like, if you want to look at like drawing or movement or whatever, right? These are kind of universal things that we see in a lot of different like different types of people, diverse people. And it's just kind of like, how do you showcase who you are, right, through this, right? So that's kind of how the way I would kind of work with that.
And I think we have just a final question before we have to wrap up. It's good that you thought we were behind, because then it left all this time for
I know.
questions and
I
discussion.
literally thought we were.
I don't know if
hurry up.
Caitlin's question, I had to step away for just a second, if Caitlin's question was answered. I'll give you a moment to read it. And Jenny, I would +1 what Jackie said. My daughters have always gone to incredibly diverse schools on multiple levels, like language, ethnicity, and um, it. I feel like they've been successful when they've been able to explore more of like who they have been, and it's been a little bit more general. So your question was the one that made me think of my daughter, so I just wanted to share that as well. But yeah, want to make sure Caitlin's question also
Yeah.
gets
Yeah.
addressed.
Thank you, Caitlin, for answering. I'm gonna just give you kind of what I do, but again, like I said, it's just what I do or what I've learned, right? So with students with disabilities and neurodivergent, so if I'm trying to, I'm thinking about all the different hats that I have. So when I'm the teacher in the classroom, right, I really do lean on my the special education teacher, them, and figuring out ways and how do we make sure that what is it that the student has, right? What is that learning disability? What is that behavioral disability if they have that, right? If they have ADHD, these different things, right? And kind of like, how do we create a space where they can participate and they feel a part of, right? Or if I have, ELLs, right, in my classroom, how am I making sure what I'm doing is kind of, for everybody. And then in the artistic component, right? Currently right now, for one of our schools, we have some students where in the music component, music for a lot of, for some young people, it's just too much for them, right? They close up, right? Um, they don't, it just, they don't like the sound. It's too much for them. It's a lot of things. It's high sensory, right? Or it might make them aggressive, in that nature. So, we're how do we still create, time for music for them, right? So are we making another station, right, where it's more instrument exploration, where they're kind of exploring the sounds of it to the way that they want it to be? How are we also incorporating another station where, like, hey, this is too much for me right now. I need to step out and I want to do this, right? The arts that I've noticed has been a little bit more therapeutic for those students. That's just been my experience. And currently, right now, those students, when they have music class, they're just like, "Ooh," like, it's a little frustrating. And then when it's Wednesdays and we have art, it's like they're like, "Oh, okay, calm down. Like, I'm gonna do this. I'm gonna make this piece. Painting seems to be a very beautiful medium for those types of students. Um, and it's not, you know, it's not as, it's something, you know, I think it's like the stroke of the brush or just how the way it feels. I think there's something there that's really powerful. But yeah, so when I'm in the classroom, I'm always kind of leading with my special education teacher, thinking about, hey, what are we going to do the most? But if I have my other hat of, hey, I'm now running a program after school, an arts program after school with teaching artists, how are we talking about it with one another to make sure that the children have the needs that they need, right? So that they feel comfortable and welcome in the space, and they should be there too, right? So that was just an example of sometimes what music can do to some children, not all children, and how the way we kind of adapt for that. We still want them to be a part of music, right? Maybe song is better. So what I've noticed too is that when we sing the song and we're not playing the instruments as loud, it's way better for sensory children, right? And also incorporating more play, right? So if we can't get that rhythm, right? If I can't get the 1, 2, 3, right? What else can I do with play, right? That can show them that rhythm and plays a safe space, right? I'm a kid. I love to play. I want to play with all these things. So that's just something. That's something I kind of thought about in the top of my head. But I'm more than happy to keep talking about it.
I know, and we have a question, but we do have to wrap up because we have some things that are starting right after this. Ebony, I don't know if I'm saying your name correctly, but I'm wondering, Jackie, if you could drop your email in the chat,
Oh
because I
yeah,
also don't want to forget and not circle back to that.
Sure.
Um,
And it's Ebony. And I didn't,
Ebony,
yeah,
thank you.
no worries. I didn't have a question. I really just wanted to make a quick statement,
Ah,
honor, and a
yes.
reflect to say that the statement, we know that this approach to pedagogy, it should be embedded just in academia in general. However, the reality is that a lot of this expression is elevated and pipelined through the arts education. So my honor statement is just to celebrate everyone on this call because we have a beautiful gift to be models to educators and administration in the learning spaces that we take up. And then to reflect, I'm going to walk away with the uplift that we should celebrate the cultural responsive that is not race, but it is from home to school. And so I will walk away with that. So I just wanted to make those 3 points here. So thank you for everyone on the call. I celebrate you all.
Thank you, Ebony. What a beautiful way to close the call by sharing that. I'm so glad that you did. And I am super grateful for everyone in this space. I think it's always, it's like, oh, we gotta go. We're a minute late, but I'm like happy to be a minute late because if there's any space that we're gonna be doing that in, I'm glad it's here. And again, just want to give so much gratitude to Jackie, and everyone here because there are so many other places that you can be, but you're here and we're in community around this really important topic. So thank you so much. Thank you, Jackie. And the conversation does not have to end today. So make sure that you've grabbed Jackie's email if you haven't already, and I will make sure that in the follow-up email that everyone gets, I will drop the survey again, I will drop her information again, as well as the resources. So thank you so much, everyone. Be well and please take care.